You are listening to part 30 of our series, 7 Medicines, The Wise Woman Way, with Susan Wheat at Time Monk Radio. Hello, Susan. Welcome back to Time Monk Radio.
Thank you, Gemini. How are you doing with all of that talk about various stimulants, sedatives, and different means of preparation last week? Did that leave you confused, or were you able to sort through it?
Well, I think it's really interesting, and I use quite a few of those in my own life, and I can relate to what you said about falling asleep next to hops tea because I've done that, and but usually I go to chamomile tea, but it's all very fascinating.
What would make you want one over the other, the chamomile or the hops?
Well, the hops is very bitter. And if I want something to relax with, if I'm, working or, getting ready to wind down for bed, the chamomile is more soothing to me, where the hops is very bitter. So it's one of those I don't enjoy as much as chamomile. I'm looking to really go to a deep sleep with the hops.
I absolutely agree with you. The hops is, it's kind of has more muscle.
Yes.
And as we were saying last week, it doesn't have as pleasant a taste.
No.
And you're willing to tolerate it when you want that extra bit of oomph there.
Yes, definitely.
Right. Right. And then, of course, I said that the mildest in terms of the sedative effect was motherwort. But I didn't mean in terms of its effect. In fact, motherwort is a very powerful anti-anxiety. It's taken as a tincture, so it's taken in very small doses, and it's not going to put you to sleep. So that's another thing that people sometimes think, sedative means that it puts you to sleep. And I thought we might talk a little bit about that this week.
Okay.
When you read books about herbs, there's like a special language of herbalism and herbalists. And when I started teaching herbal medicine almost 50 years ago, that was the first thing that I taught people, was I taught them this language. I had got 2 big poster boards, and I wrote up all the special herbalist words on them with short definitions, and we went over the vocabulary so that we could then talk about the herbs with this herbalist vocabulary. Several things have disrupted that, and I don't do that anymore. I don't think it's so important for people. One of the best things that's disrupted it is that those words aren't so standardly used anymore. You're still going to find them in a lot of books, but you don't find people really like hewing to them the way that you did 50 or 60 or 100 years ago, or 150 years ago, and those were like really the describers of the herb. Now we have, it seems, so much more vocabulary, in which we find it easier to talk about herbs without using this particular set of words, but you're still going to find it. And the other thing is that these words have been co-opted by the modern medical establishment for drugs. So we have the kind of odd situation in which an herbalist might refer to an herb as having a particular quality, and a druggist or a pharmacist might refer to a drug as having a particular quality, and those two things would actually work in ways that would achieve the same end result, but through such different pathways that it's quite a mistake to think that they are both X's or both Y's, that if we use the same vocabulary word to describe their action, it's not so much the action we're describing anymore, it's now merely the end result. That said, that all put to the side, let's look at a few of these words and some words that will tip us off. You remember that last week I said that I was being very fine and very discreet and very subtle about my definitions and drawing distinctions between nourishing, tonifying, and stimulating, sedating as being one thing. And that I also said that people are also going to run all over these words and not use them with the nicety that I'm using them. So I thought that would also help us to see what other kinds of words you might keep an ear out for that would help let you know that you're in the realm of stimulating, sedating. And especially when we're looking at sedating herbs, we would see words like demulcent, anodyne, antitussive, emollient, relaxant, soporific, and narcotic. And I have put these terms, as we did last week with the herbs, in ascending order. So a demulcent is something that soothes and smooths. I think of sassafras leaf infusion as a wonderful demulcent, and it soothes and smooths. And I was very interested to see Dr. Christopher listing sassafras as a stimulant, but then I realized, oh yes, I use the leaves, which are slippery and demulcent, and he uses the bark, which is astringent. Now the words astringent and alterative and adaptogen are words that could indicate sedative or stimulant ability, but usually indicate tonics. They're herbs that are actually being tonifying for us. So we have demulcent, that first level, the soothing and smoothing. And then we have anodyne, and anodyne is something that helps to kill pain. Things as simple as plantain leaf chewed up and put on an itchy mosquito bite are anodynes. So again, although the actual action and the actual effect is certainly strong enough to do what we want it to do, it's not going to have any side effects. These are very mild remedies, effective, but quite mild. Antitussive herbs are sedative to coughing. They have sedative effects, sometimes on the nerves, sometimes on the mucus production, and slow down coughing. So we're starting to get into a stronger physical reaction here. And emollient is thought to be slipperier than demulcent, that a demulcent helps to make things slow, whereas an emollient is like you're oiling and greasing things, and they are really going to be slipping and sliding and moving around. And from there, of course, to the relaxant, which could relax a specific organ, a specific system, like the cardiovascular system. We say, oh, motherwort, it doesn't injure our attention, but it relaxes our anxiety. So it is a relaxer in that way. We have muscle relaxers. Hypericum tincture is a muscle relaxer. The oil of hypericum is also a muscle relaxer. Relaxers really go deep into the system or the tissue and slow and soothe things. Soporific is the fancy word that herbalists use and that pharmacists use too for things that put you to sleep. Oh, that play was So soporific would be a very catty comment if you wrote a play that you thought was very boring, meaning that it makes you want to fall asleep. And Jim and I are just talking about the soporific effect of hops, that it tastes not great. It's a kind of bitter but interesting kind of resinous taste to it that really swiftly brings on sleep. And one of the softest ways to use hops is to make a hops pillow. So here, rather than even ingesting the hops, we're simply letting the scent of the hops trigger the regions of the brain that helps us go to sleep. Hops pillows have been used for centuries as sleeping aids, and all you have to do is get some hops and make sure it has some smell and sew it into a little bag, or get somebody else to sew a little bag, or buy a drawstring bag and put it in your pillow where you'll be able to smell it as you sleep for that soporific effect. And, of course, then narcotic, which is something that really can make you pass out, having a narcotic effect, like a large dose of my tincture of skullcap. A small dose is definitely an aid to getting to sleep, but a large dose can seem quite narcotic in its effect, making one feel so sleepy that you simply can't keep your eyes open. With the herbal stimulants, we would be looking at a different set of words, obviously, and those would be things like diuretic, diaphoretic, silalagogue, cholagogue, emmenagogue, laxative, cathartic, and irritating. And these are some words that help us get that the effect of the herb is primarily going to be to increase activity, that these are the herbal stimulants. It's interesting to me that the realm of herbal stimulants is not as well populated as herbal sedatives. I'm not sure if that's because herbs want us to slow down and don't especially want us to speed up. But even though there are fewer plants that do speed us up, human beings really like those plants. And we have sought them out and sought out ways to get the stimulants from them. Think about the world's favorite stimulant, a stimulant used daily, used multiple times a day by many people on this planet, and that is coffee or substitute black tea. But those two herbs, and herbs they are not necessarily at first blush delicious or tasty. When you compare either one of them to a cup of mint tea, you would certainly say, who indeed figured out that you could do this? And interestingly enough, those plants do have origin stories. They have stories about who was the first one to figure out how to make use of this plant. Coffee. My favorite origin story is that a goat herd saw his goats eat the berries from a plant, and then they would caper and frolic. And so the goat herd thought that this was interesting, and he took some of the berries to a local monastery and gave it to one of the monks, who experimented with it and found indeed that it could keep him from going to sleep, and that it was from there that the use of coffee got its start. So the green coffee bean is not yummy at all. In fact, the coffee has to be fermented, it has to be roasted, it has to then be ground, it has to be brewed, it has to be brewed a certain way. You talk to a coffee aficionado, and they are going to tell you the water must be at this precise temperature, right? And you brew it for this long and no more. And how wonderful that we have been able to figure that out. Coffee, a related stimulating plant. Again, when we went to the coffee farm in Costa Rica, they spent, more than an hour explaining how the chocolate, when we went to the chocolate plantation, how the chocolate was grown, how the seeds were extracted, how they were fermented and then dried and then ground and then processed. These stimulants are not as easy to get to as a cup of hops tea or a cup of chamomile tea, but we have pursued them. We want them. We like them. We're really looking for them. So herbalists talk about people whose diets contain lots of alkaloids like caffeine, and people whose diets don't. Many herbs work because they have alkaloids, and it's thought that if your body's already processing a lot of alkaloids, that it will just process the other herbal alkaloids out more quickly, and they won't have that much of an effect. So what we find worldwide is that many herbalists, whether they're in China or India or the Americas, like to add a stimulant herb to their herbal formula, rather, as one herbalist put it to me, like throwing a stick of dynamite into a log jam. And I know that was indeed done. That certainly nearby where I live, up in the Adirondacks, that trees were felled in the winter when it was easier to move about in the woods, and they were, put on the frozen streams. And as the spring thaw came and that wood would move downstream, there would be times when they would just make a huge log jam, and they would indeed throw dynamite in there. But as I thinking about the people that I work with, I don't know any people that need to be dynamited. And certainly I don't make herbal formulas. But I wouldn't, just as a matter of course, put a stimulant into my formula so that I could get it moving. Those herbs that are put into the formulas for that purpose of really getting that formula in and getting that formula moving are called adjuvant herbs, while we're doing a vocabulary night. And they would include adjuvant herbs such as black pepper and lobelia. Ginger is also frequently used as an adjuvant herb. In Ayurvedic medicine, many, many recipes contain either ginger or black pepper, and the idea, again, being that you have to shake things up a little bit in order to get the other herbs into the person. In American herbalism, lobelia was that herb. And when I was first studying herbal medicine, the idea was that you always used 3 herbs, and you had your main herb, and then you had your supporting herb, and then you had your adjuvant herb. You had the herb that went in there and kicked you-know-what hind end to make sure that the formula really got in. And lobelia was the one that did that, and lobelia was that adjuvant stimulant herb. And lobelia has always fascinated me because it portrays so strongly this stimulants or sedatives or stimulants kind of thing that I have been talking about here for several weeks now. And certainly lobelia is a stimulant. People take it, you can see the energy rise right up their face and see them turn red. I also saw somebody drink just Dong Quai, and same thing happened, just the blood rushed right up to the man's head. He turned bright red and had to sit down. So we can see the stimulating effect. People feel the stimulating effect. It certainly stimulates peristalsis in the intestines. It can stimulate you to throw up. It can stimulate contraction of the lungs to push things out of the lungs. But if you take a large enough dose of lobelia, it is so sedative you cannot move. It is narcotic. What an interesting little plant. So when we're thinking about using herbs directly as stimulants or directly as sedatives, it's a good idea to be aware of the different herbs that are available to us so that we can use them very wisely, as you're doing, Gemini, so that you have, okay, this is it I like, really need to get something to go to sleep right now. You're going to reach for the hops. I just want to unwind and be calm. I'm going to take some chamomile. I'm having a hard time sleeping because I have some physical pain. I would reach for the skull cap or the marijuana tincture. I can't get to sleep because I'm so anxious. We could have some motherwort tincture to resolve those anxieties. So we want to, I think of it as setting up a curve or making like a bowl so that we don't have just one herb that we rely on over and over again for every situation, but that like a beautiful garden of different flowers, that we don't make the same bouquet every day, and we don't need to use the same plant all the time. Plants also tend to grow well in one situation for a while and then kind of die out. I'm always surprised when I see photographs or videos of my gardens 10, 15, or 20 years ago at the plants that were growing there then, and I think, whatever happened to that? So let's go on and talk about some other favorite stimulants. And again, acknowledging that people are far more likely to already have an herbal stimulant in their life than they are to already have an herbal sedative in their life, simply because it is estimated that 90% of the world's population drinks either coffee or tea on a daily basis, and these are definitely stimulant herbs. They both contain the alkaloid substance caffeine, which is indeed mildly addictive. There's some really great health effects from drinking both coffee and tea. So the fact that we get a little addicted is probably not a problem at all. Also, I find that a great many people have black pepper in their daily diet and or cayenne in their daily diet. The peppers are quite stimulating. They get a lot of press because of their supposed adjuvant effect that makes everything work better in the body. But like most stimulants, they do undercut health, and they are irritating stimulants. So I am not happy with the idea of adding them to anything and everything to get the health benefits of them. Certainly, they are great to have on hand in some situations, and if I lived in a climate that was really hot, I would see if I could get my digestive system to accommodate them. My digestive system does not like to be irritated by the peppers at all. And it's interesting to me that when people eat a pepper-free diet, they find that the digestion improves a lot, because remember, these stimulants are mild undercuts to our health. They are not tonics, and when we remove them from our diets, and again, I'm not thinking that they are ideal for lifestyle, but simply acknowledging that this is the lifestyle that most people have chosen, which is a lifestyle that includes herbs that are direct stimulants and not so much using the herbs that are the sedatives. Ginger and mint and mustard are also plants that are fairly frequently in people's diets, depending on how much curry or how much Asian food that you eat. Ginger might be quite a bit in your diet. Let's say the jury is a little bit out on ginger. I personally think of ginger as being a pretty fair stimulating plant, but there are people who think of it more as an alterative or an adaptogen. So I think where that ginger falls for each of us is going to be a little bit different, and it's going to be partly depending on where you live. Certainly, for people who live in tropical regions where ginger grows, ginger is probably going to be more toward that adaptogen and tonic side for them and less a really strong stimulant. For people of the untropical places, the plants that are going to take the place of that in our diet are the plants of the mint family, the rosemary, the thyme, the oregano, the basil. These are all mild stimulants. The mints are definitely classified as stimulants, and they stimulate digestive activity, although they are also pain-killing for pain from the digestive system. So once again, focusing on the fact that it stimulate, sedate, not stimulate or sedate. These things are very close to the same. Mustard and horseradish, plants of the cabbage family and mild stimulants as well. Well, once again, depending on how we prepare it and how we use it, mustard can go from being, that's a spicy on my dog there, on my hot dog, to somebody was just killed by mustard gas. So how we prepare that is going to make a big difference. And horseradish is a kind of mustard. It's in the mustard family, but it's much, much stronger than mustard is. Oh, but that's the root of horseradish, and certainly it's stronger than the mustard leaf, but it's not stronger than the mustard seed. So once again, I'm reminding us that when we talk about plants, we really need to know what part of the plant is being talked about, because it's going to have more or less of a stimulant or sedative effect with more or less side effects and detrimental effects depending on what part we're using, how we're preparing it, and the duration and amount of our dose. Of course, we couldn't leave a discussion of herbal stimulants without talking about ephedra and guarana. Ephedra is also known as Mormon tea, and interestingly enough, it is an herb that has been used especially by the Chinese as a lung herb. Ma Wang is its Chinese name, and it is quite possibly one of the 3 best herbs for restoring health to the lung tissues in the world. It's known in the United States as Mormon tea. However, ephedra powdered and put into capsules caused such a strong stimulating effect that several people taking it in too large doses as a diet aid actually died from, I believe it was heart failure, and so one cannot get ephedra anymore in the United States. Guarana is an herb from South America, and it is widely available in the United States. And it is very beloved by herbalists and others who like a little stimulant at their herbalist ball. And you'll often find Zoom balls made by Rosemary Gladstar and other herbalists containing guarana for a little kick. Kava kava is also a plant. I believe we talked about it slightly, but as we end this week's show, kava kava, we use at our herbalist balls. You drink some, and when your nose starts to tingle, you decide, are you going to go deeply to sleep, or are you going to stay up and dance all night? How about you? What kind of herbal stimulants do you use, Gemini?
Oh, gosh. Well, we had talked about this briefly one other time. I've used catnip as a relaxant, but also a stimulant. And, oh, gosh, what else?
Coffee, tea, chocolate?
Yes, coffee, tea. Not a huge fan of chocolate. Definitely the coffee and tea, though.
And why not? They're wonderful herbs, and there's so many different varieties and flavors of them, huh?
Yes, definitely.
Definitely. All right. Well, we're going to come back next week and talk about acupuncture. I'll talk to you then.
Thanks so much, Susan.
Green blessings.
Thank you. This concludes part 30 of our series, The 7 Medicines, The Wise Woman Way, with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio.